right, so last class we left off, we were talking about the various elements of a contract, required for a contract, and we were working through the legality element. And we left off, we talked about the statute of frauds. We said that in order for it to be a legally valid contract, it had to be a legal purpose. And then the next thing as it relates to legality is that there are certain rules relating to the interpretation of a contract. So in terms of the interpretation of a contract that is in writing is always going to take precedent over an oral contract. So we know contracts for less than $500, they can be valid if they're not in writing, if they're oral. However, if you have any contract, it's always better to have it in writing. So word of mouth is basically overridden, if you will, by written terms. So if you're a written contract too, all the terms relating to that contract should be in the contract. If you orally agree to something that has to do with a contract, and it's not specifically written into that contract, then technically speaking, it doesn't exist. Okay? So oral terms can't override existing written terms. Okay? And then the best evidence as it relates to a contract is the original contract. So if there are copies of a contract, the original actual contract would be the overriding document. So let's talk about the next element, which is consideration. Consideration is the mutual exchange of benefits and detriments in a contract. Benefits are the things of value that you get, and detriments are the things that you give up. So let's just say that Ben and I are going to contract for this pencil. Ben really likes this pencil a lot, my nifty pencil, and we agree that I'll sell it to him for $2. So his benefit is going to be getting the pencil. My benefit is going to be getting the money. My detriment is giving up my pencil. His detriment is giving up his money. So 3 types of detriments are the giving of something that you have the right to keep. I have the right to keep my money. He has the right, I have the right to keep my pencil. He has the right to keep his money. Doing something you have the right not to do. Okay, that can be a form of consideration. I have the right not to sell my pencil to him. Yeah. I have the right to not sell my pencil to him. So doing that is something I'm giving up. And then we have lastly the concept of forbearance. Forbearance is basically not doing something that you have a legal right to do. What do I mean by that? The primary type of forbearance is the right to sue somebody. When you give up the right to sue somebody, that's forbearance. I forbear on my right to sue somebody, meaning I'm giving up my right to sue somebody. So I can sue, let's say Matt, he's driving down the road and he drives over my mailbox, knocks it down, okay, and I decide I'm going to sue him. He doesn't want to repay me for my mailbox or whatever, so I decide I'm going to sue him. I'm going to sue him for $1,000. Okay? No, I'm going to sue him for $5,000. Okay? Because he knocked over my mailbox and he hit my bushes that are right near my mailbox, and it's going to take me a lot of time and aggravation. Those bushes are old and very established, and they have nice flowers on them, and so I'm really aggravated, so I'm going to sue him. He doesn't want to be sued for $5,000, so he negotiates with me, and he says, Mrs. McGrath, if you agree not to sue me, I'll pay you, instead of $5,000, I'll pay you $1,000. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. I would take that. I could get my mailbox replaced. I can put new bushes in, okay? And I think Matt would probably think twice about running my mailbox over ever again, okay? So I agree. So I give up my right to sue him. That means that at no later time can I turn around and sue him for that situation. I can sue him for something else, but I can't sue him for that. Okay?
Ms. McGrath, in that case, is it best to have that down in a written?
Oh yeah. You would definitely want to get that in writing. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. The forbearance agreement in writing. You definitely would want to.
What is the part of the blue set?
Oh, that's relating to the next thing. Okay. So yeah, it wasn't, the page wasn't aligned properly, so it's kind of a mess. Okay. So characteristics of consideration. So our consideration must be a bargain for exchange. So Ben and I, we negotiate and we both agree that the value of $2 for this pencil is reasonable. Okay? It's bargained for. It has to be something of value. So I value my pencil and he values his money. So those are things that are of value. Legality, the items that are being considered have to be of a legal nature. So like if I think the other day I gave the example of the drug deal. Okay? Clearly that's not legal. So the consideration is not valid. Okay? As it relates to this term, unconscionable, typically speaking, when we're talking about considerations, the courts, so this says up here in the right-hand corner, this says the courts will not step in to determine value. Typically speaking, the courts will not step in and decide the value in a contract. The only exception to that is if we're dealing with unconscionable contracts. Unconscionable means that one of the parties has an unfair advantage. They have an abundance of knowledge relative to the other party that's entering into that contract, and they use that and take advantage of the other party. Sometimes that happens, it's happened in the past where, say, lenders, financial institutions, take advantage of maybe foreign people who maybe don't speak the language and read very well. Or maybe they take advantage of maybe minorities who maybe haven't entered into types of financial contracts and they have overly burdensome terms in those contracts. So if the party is acting in an unconscionable fashion, basically kind of a little unethical, then the courts will step in as it relates to the value. But typically speaking, the courts will not step in. So Ben and I were negotiating. If I tried to sell him this pencil for $10 instead of $2, and he really liked this pencil for $10, and he wanted to pay me $10 for this pencil, hey, good for me, right? He's happy. He's thinking this is a great pencil for $10, and I'm happy because I'm getting my 50-cent pencil for $10, you know? So the courts won't step in just because I make a good deal for myself. Otherwise, the courts would be stepping in all the time. Okay? It's only if it's like unconscionable, like something like somebody's taking real advantage. Yes, John?
So, like, what's the word?
Say what?
What's the word?
Advantage. Yeah, right. If the courts are taking, if one of the parties is taking unfair advantage of the other party, then the courts would step in. Otherwise, no. Okay? If you make a bad deal, it's your problem. Okay? All right. Other things on consideration. We have 4 categories or types of consideration. Money, property, and services. So let's say I can contract with Ben that I'll sell him my pencil in exchange for him cleaning my boards. And he's like, yeah, no big deal. It'll take me 15 minutes. I'll clean your boards, Mrs. McGrath. That would be, we're exchanging property for services. Promises not to sue. We've already talked about that. That's forbearance. So that's a form of consideration. Me giving up my right to sue is the forbearance, okay? Is the consideration. And then charitable pledges. Charitable pledges have to do with the concept of promissory estoppel. Promissory estoppel. We'll talk about that on the next slide. But everybody know what a charitable pledge is? Let's say the Gilman Public Library is going to build an addition, and it's going to cost $1 million. And then they solicit lots of donations, okay? And, Ben donates $10,000, Matt donates $10,000, Simon donates $5,000, okay? Llewellyn donates $10,000, Miss McGrath donates $10,000. They get all these people to sign up. Simon was shaking his head; he didn't really want to. You can't help that, okay? So we all decide we're going to agree, and then the library gets enough donations that they decide they're going to move forward, and they contract with a builder, and they go through and get attorneys and lawyers and everybody, an architect and so on and so forth. We all promise to pay. Technically speaking, we're not really getting anything, so we don't really get consideration. Maybe we get our name on a plaque or something, but that's about it. But the courts will require that we follow through on our promise because the library is basing their decisions on our promise. And I'll talk a little bit about promissory estoppel in just a minute. Other problems with consideration is if the parties dispute the amounts. They thought that they had an agreed upon amount, but then they didn't. So if that's the case, then like you might bring in a mediator or somebody to help resolve it, and they get to what we call accord and satisfaction, where they basically come to an agreement to decide how they're going to handle it. So Ben and I, we thought we agreed on $2, but Ben thought it was $1.75. We go back and forth, and then we basically get to a point where we both agree. We call it accord and satisfaction. We're not agreeing to probably what we originally agreed to, but we both can get comfortable with the follow-up agreement. And then we can also have a situation where we have an undisputed amount. We don't have an amount that we're disputing, but maybe he thought it was this pencil and I thought it was a different one. Okay. Other things with regard to consideration. Exceptions to the requirements of consideration. We don't need to have new form of consideration for promises that are discharged after bankruptcy. So let's say somebody had a house. They went into bankruptcy, and it was decided that they had their payments discharged in bankruptcy, meaning released. But they wanted to be able to keep their house, so they decided that they would continue to make their house payments. They don't have to come up with a new form of consideration. They can go to court and basically agree to it, and then they can move forward with making those house payments. Okay? So that can happen. Debts after the statute of limitations. Statute of limitations is the limit on the time you have to sue somebody in a contract, typically 4 years. So if a contract ends, a debt contract ends, and 4 years have passed and the other party hasn't sued you, they can't sue you, basically, okay? And then here we come to this promissory estoppel. Promissory estoppel is the concept that if you made a promise and somebody else moved forward based on your promise, they changed their position. A key is this term right here. They changed their position based on your promise. If they change their position based on your promise, like the library, based on all of our promises, then we have to follow through with our promise, because otherwise the library would be disadvantaged. Okay? So we all made this promise. We're going to pay $10,000, $10,000, $10,000, $5,000. Okay? We can't pull back on our promises because they started building that building. If we don't follow through on our promise to pay, then they don't have the money to pay the contractors and the architects and the people who supplied them with their stuff. So we have to follow through. If somebody else is changing their position based on our promise, we have to follow through. And then options, this is where you pay money to keep an offer open. Okay, so illusory. So let's say everybody knows where Gate Farm is, right? Does everybody know where Gate Farm is? Gate Farm on Western Avenue? Right? Near the bowling alley. Okay? Gate Farm. And everybody knows where Pizzagram is, right? Okay. So let's say Pizzagram contracts with Gate Farm and they say, Gate Farm, we will buy all of your tomatoes that you produced this summer to make our pizza sauce for our pizzas this year. So we'll buy all of yours and we'll pay $10 a bushel. Does that seem like a real, genuine contract? How many say yes? $10 a bushel. Okay. It's not. It's not. It's illusory. Why is it illusory? How many tomatoes is Gate Farms going to produce? Do we have any idea?
6.
We have no idea. We have absolutely no idea. They could have, they could have fields and fields of tomatoes, but those tomatoes they could get a fungus and they could all die. So now, is there a genuine contract? There isn't. It's illusory. It seems like it's real, but it's not. Because neither party can definitively guarantee what's going to happen. Okay? So that would be an illusory promise. Future gifts and legacies. Let's say, I promise in the future, I like Courtney so much that I promise that when she turns 21 years old, I'm going to give her my fur coat. Okay? She says, okay, sure. I'm like, okay. So she turns 21, she comes back to me, and she says, Ms. McGrath, I'm 21 now. And I'm like, yay, congratulations. Hug, hug. Okay? She's like, where's my fur coat? I'm like, oh, yeah, I changed my mind. I gave it to Llewellyn. Okay? Not Nicole. She doesn't want it. I don't know.
Courtney, what are you
So,
doing?
what? She's gonna fight her. All right, okay. I don't have to. I can change my mind. I don't have to give it to her. Past consideration. So Ryan's going to go off to college next year. Let's say, well, not next year, in a few months, right? So let's say Nicole, being the nice sister that she is, she goes and helps move him into his college dorm room and stuff like that, right? Right? You're way stronger than I am, okay? So you are going to help move him into college dorm room, right? And then the next day, Ryan's like, oh, Coley, I'll give you $25 for helping move me into my dorm room. Coley's like, okay, great. And then, we leave to come back to Albany, and Ryan's still there. And then Ryan comes back for, break or something, and Coley's like, where's my $25, Ryan? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, you promised me $25 for helping you move. Well, he promised after the fact. There wasn't an agreement up front, so really her efforts were considered past consideration. She already did it, so it's in the past. So something promised or given up in the past can't be consideration for a new agreement. Yes?
With future gifts and legacies, if you can't do that, then how do wills work?
Yes. If you have a will, you can put something in your will that spells out that you're going to give something to somebody, but you can change your will anytime you want. Somebody can't require you to follow through with something that's in your will. If I change my wills 10 times before I pass away, I can change as many times as I want. She can't, if I will something to somebody in my first will, and then I make a new will, the people in my first will can't tell the people in the second will that the first one is what's going to happen. Okay? So you can keep changing it. Okay? So pre-existing duties. So Ryan, he's got a pre-existing duty. He's got to mow the lawn. He's got to mow the lawn, and for $25, I'm going to give him $25 every time he mows the lawn. I can't then turn around. He's got a pre-existing duty, and I've got a pre-existing duty to pay him that $25. I can't turn around and say, well, Ryan, you've got to weed the flower beds and trim the hedges and still pay him the $25. Because our agreement, we had a pre-existing agreement that he's going to do X for that $25. Okay? So he can't get, I can't have him do all these extra things for that same $25. Yes?
What's the writing for time consideration?
It says something promised or given up in the past can't be consideration for a new contract. And then we already talked. Oops, my bad. We already talked about promises to ascend social agreements, social engagements. You can't require somebody to follow through on that. Gotta go quickly here. Ways that contracts end. The first way that a contract ends is by performance. And these are all various types of performance. If I perform within the time and as agreed, then that's the form of performance. Satisfactory, tender performance. Tender performance is when I go to offer to make the payment, and I tender the payment. That's tendering, tender of performance. He does his performance, whatever he's going to do, and I pay him. Okay. The two in the middle, satisfactory performance, substantial performance. Satisfactory performance, typically speaking, this says the law requires a contract to be performed in a satisfactory fashion based on the reasonable person standard. Based on the reasonable person standard. So, if I contracted with Gavin to paint my room, and I asked for it to be painted like a creamy, soft yellow, and he's gonna get the paint and everything, and he paints the room, and he does everything except for maybe he doesn't do the best job up in the top corner. Okay, you know, it's satisfactory to the reasonable person. You know, maybe he leaves me some touch-up paint, and I can go there and touch it up. Okay, it's reasonable. However, if I talk about a creamy white, and he goes and paints it that bright yellow on the basketball hoop, that's probably not acceptable. That's not really going to be satisfactory, okay? Or if he leaves one wall out, that's probably not satisfactory to a reasonable person, okay? There's also another term under satisfactory where it says to the satisfaction of the other party. If a contract is going to be so specific that it says to the party's satisfaction, then you keep doing it until that party is satisfied, okay? Whatever that it is supposed to be. So let's say I contract with Sydney. She's a famous artist, and I ask her to paint my portrait. I'm going to pay her $5,000 to paint my portrait, and in the contract it says to my satisfaction. She paints it, I don't really like it. I can keep making her go back and fixing it until I'm satisfied, okay? Substantial performance is a little bit different. Substantial performance, it speaks to how much of the contract is performed in terms of completeness, okay? So let's just say, again, we have this room, and I'll switch it up. We have a house, okay? I'm building a house. It's January. The house gets finished. Everything's done inside, outside, except the yard is not, they didn't put the grass in and they didn't put the flower beds in. Okay, because it's January and it's Albany. So there's snow on the ground. I want to move into my house. The builder wants to get paid for everything that he's done with the house. Is the house done? It's substantially done. The house is done. Can I go live in that house? Yeah. It's got heat, I got my sinks, I got my toilet, I got my electricity, my walls are painted, my carpet's in, yada yada, right? Substantially complete. The landscaping's not done. What we can do is we can commence the termination, discharge for performance, but hold back an amount of money until the landscaping is done. which is probably going to be like March, April, okay, when the ground thaws out. So we take, let's say it's a $300,000 house. We take $10,000, we put it into an escrow account in the bank until everything is done. So we can discharge for performance. Keep that in mind. We're discharging for performance. The builder's going to get his $290,000. I don't get to keep the $10,000. I don't keep it. It goes into a bank account in escrow until the rest of it is complete. So it's virtually complete. We hold that money aside, and then in the spring and April, the builder comes back, puts the landscaping in, puts some grass down, and then he gets the rest of his $10,000. If he doesn't come back and do that, then I can use that $10,000 to get somebody else to do that same work. Okay? But we get to discharge the contract. I get to move into my house. Otherwise, I got to wait until April to move into my house. And I don't really want to do that. Discharge by mutual agreement. We can end a contract by both parties agreeing to end the contract. Involuntary discharge. Involuntary discharge are two categories. Impossibility of performance. Usually, with impossibility of performance, we're talking about the item has been destroyed. So let's say I go and I'm going to sell my car. I get in a car accident. In the meantime, Ben and he was going to buy it. My car gets in an accident and gets destroyed. The subject matter of the contract is destroyed. We can discharge it by involuntary discharge because the item has been destroyed. Operation of law is where if the law changes as to the nature of that contract, the contract can be discharged. So let's say we have, I sell a piece of land to Matt, and he wants to build an office building on that land, and the area is zoned for commercial property, but then the law changes and now it's zoned for residential. He's got no control over it, I have no control over it, but we may discharge by operation of the law that contract because it's not for what he contracted it for. It's not zoned the way he wanted it to be able to do with it the use that he was planning to do. And breach of contract. A contract to be ended because the parties breach one or both, meaning they don't follow through with the agreement that they specified. Breach means they default, they don't follow through with what they agreed. All right.